I realize that opinions are pretty much split. I wish that I could tell you that there was a real study that's very scientifically made and all the parameters are done for, and they say, oh, minimum wage is up and employment, goes up and vice versa, but it's just not possible. It's hard to say a correlation between a country having a minimum wage and it being a good thing for that country and not, given all the other variables that exist within that country, social practices, economic practices, how much the government is in the economy. You just can't say, oh, this is definitely a good thing. So what you're often restricted to is kind of deductive philosophy and saying, oh, well, based on this standard, I think this is true, etc. And so you actually have to just read through a lot of those. So although I won't be able to back this up with a lot of fancy graphs, I want to at least elucidate the topic for all of you and make you think about whether or not the minimum wage is definitely a good thing. Now, minimum wages are pretty obviously simple. The state sets a standard for what the poverty level is. It's a certain amount of money. In America right now, it is about $11,000 a year in 2012 is the poverty level. And so the idea is the minimum wage should be at a level where you can work at that level and either hit the poverty line or go above it, hopefully, to say, okay, you're sustainable, you're able to live, you're able to make a living off of that. And that makes sense. A country would want to do that. They don't want their citizens to starve. They want them to make a respectable amount of money and say, okay, you got this much money, therefore you'll be able to buy food, you'll be able to have a house, etc. However, it's not always so simple. And there are some situations when you think about it that the minimum wage actually might be a detriment to employment. Let me give you an example. Let's say we have our friend Bill. And Bill just got a new job. He's working at a factory down the road, and they've started him out on a payment of $5 an hour. Now, it's not the best job in the world. He works the line, and he has to work 8 hours a day, but he's making a living, he's making a wage. Now, for his employer to want Bill to come to the factory, Bill has to offer him a certain amount of money made over that $5 limit, right? Because you're not necessarily giving away charity all the time, you're running a business. So let's say when he hires on Bill, Bill's making him $6 an hour. So although Bill's getting $5, the employer's getting $6, so he makes $1 profit. Bill gets his paycheck, the employer gets his. Now, all of a sudden, a minimum wage law comes into effect. And it says, actually, you must pay your worker $7 an hour, or else they can't work for you, because that is the accepted limit. Well, now the employer looks at Bill and says, well, if I hire you, you're only really making me $6 an hour, and I have to pay you $7, so I'd be losing money. So, guess what happens? Bill might get laid off. Of course, there are other options. He could get more training, he might get another job, etc. But what can often happen is a worker like Bill, who might not have a lot of work experience, finds that his level of work output just isn't up to par with what the minimum wage is, as it's sort of an arbitrary value based on what the poverty line is. So it can actually have unintended consequences for both having people working where they are at that level and for working in the future if they try to find a job and find that they can't reach that output at that level. But that being said, there are well-intentioned portions to this. I mean, the minimum wage is designed to have people all living at the right level, at the correct level. And you might argue that if it's set, the market will adjust and everyone will be on the same page and it'll be a good thing. You might also argue that the redistribution of wealth from a wealthier person to a person who has maybe less money and is working at the minimum wage, maybe that's a good thing because they'd be spending more money instead of saving it, improving the economy, all good things. What it can often boil down to is how much you believe in the poverty line, in minimum wage, and in the state deciding those things for you. If you believe that you can live at a level below that, or you believe that having a job at a lower than the minimum wage will get you the experience and practice to achieve a better wage in the future, is it really up to someone else to make that decision? Or should you be the one who decides what you want to do with your time and with your money? Of course, we don't always have that choice. But what it brings to mind is the sense that While simple concepts like a minimum wage might appeal very well to our hearts and might seem like the best thing to do, oftentimes they can have unintended consequences that we might not realize in the first place. Before we vote with our conscience on every single issue, we must make sure that our passion doesn't delude us into thinking that these simple laws might be good for everyone, especially when oftentimes we're not even affected by those laws in the first place. So think about the logic of the situation and what's actually happening in the economy before you absolutely decide everything with your heart because it makes sense and because it feels right. It's hard to always make the right decision, and oftentimes it can go against the first logic that comes to mind. So think strongly, think logically, and do have heart and passion, because there are good reasons for most of these topics. And so you just have to think through them with